Hi, everyone. Welcome to mbaMission and GMAT Club's presentation on creating a standout Harvard Business School application essay. I'm Harold Simansky. I'm one of the senior consultants at mbaMission, and I'm looking forward to going through this presentation with all of you. My intention is for it to take about 30 to 45 minutes. My thought is that then leaving plenty of times for questions. In fact, at some point during the presentation itself, I will pause to let people ask some questions. And I recognize that I believe this was advertised as creating a standout HBS, Stanford, and Wharton application. And the reality is there's a lot to talk about with HBS, and I will be very clear as far as how things also should manifest the same way in HBS and Wharton and Stanford essays as well. Very easy to do. What I will also say to everybody is I'm going through a lot of information now. Clearly, everyone is going to have their own specific questions about their own profiles. To that end, please sign up with us for your 3 mbaMissions 30-minute consultation. Free, whether with me or one of my other colleagues. But all means, just reach out to us and get a better sense of, and let us give you a better sense of how you stand up, what the application season looks like this year, how things are coming together, and we can also give you some basic understanding of the things you should really be stressing in your application. So with that in mind, let's get started. Creating a standout HBS application essay. So the first thing I want to make everyone aware of is here at mbaMission, we have actually published a book that includes actual real successful essays to both HBS and GSB. You can buy it on our website for $24. There is always something of a caveat or a warning to this. You will see a number of different essays. I think it's something like 50 different essays. Do not use them as models for your own essays. Do not try to copy them and just try to change some information. That will not work. What I want you to look at is just how each of these essays feels very authentic, that even though these essays now are less than 1,000 words, they really show who that person is. They really see a unique voice. The reality is that many of those people come from what one would call overrepresented demographics, whether it's international students, whether it's by industry, whether it's by function. The reality is that these essays prove to the admissions committee that you're like no one else, that there is no such thing as an overrepresented demographic. So with that in mind, that's the commercial, but now let's get to the presentation itself. So we're going to talk about what's actually inside the mind of the HBS admissions officer who's reading your application. Then we're going to talk about creating a standout HBS essay, a lot of information there, and an application strategy, just when to do and how to do it and when to do it, and finally a little bit more about our own company. So inside the mind of the HBS admissions officer. So very quickly here, there is obviously many admissions officers. Many of them have been at it for quite a long time. So this is nothing new to them. When you add in the fact that they are looking at up to 10,000 applications a year, they are very sophisticated in terms of what they'll read, what they'll understand, what they'll believe. So from that perspective, take this lesson that yes, you have both stiff competition, but also the admissions committee, members of the admissions committee are actually quite sophisticated, quite knowledgeable in terms of what their job is and who they see as an appropriate member of the HBS class. Very quickly, acceptance rate is at 11%, but I tell people this year the acceptance rate is likely to be higher for the simple reason, as of right now, we're seeing a little bit of a lull, a little bit of a pothole or gully in terms of the acceptance of the number of people applying. So this year, the acceptance rate, instead of 11%, maybe 12%. 13%. So you're not seeing a huge difference. So don't be convinced that it's going to be a much easier year. It will still be a tough year, no question about it. And one thing that's very important when you think about applying to business schools, okay, who's your audience? Who are they looking for? What are they looking for in terms of what a solid, a strong applicant is? Obviously, from the perspective of professors, you have to be smart. From the perspective of students, you have to really have academic potential. Again, just like with professors, a little wrinkle here is HBS teaches using the case method. The idea here of you're all thrown, 90 of you will be in a room and you have to hash out a business problem. The reality is that you need to be articulate. You need to have good English. You need to be able to think on your feet. All of those things will be tested throughout the application process, but you can certainly allude to them as part of the essays, as other places in your resume, other places in the application. Recruiters, alumni, obviously, they want you to really stand for the school, as does the dean, being good members of the community, being people that they'll be proud of. And as far as the recruiters go, even at a place like Harvard Business School, Stanford Wharton, the reality is that they actually recognize sometimes it can be tough to get a job. So as you think about where your career path is, do not tell them that you want to be an astronaut, because you will not get a job as an astronaut. Do not tell them that you want to do only private equity, because those are hard jobs to come by. So look at the employment report for each school and understand where people get jobs. Okay, and again, one thing, and there's always a little bit of attention here, admission committee members are obviously very sophisticated in what they do. That said, they're not probably as knowledgeable as some of you are about what your own job is. And from your perspective, do not start being jargony. Do not start saying things that you'd only say to a colleague. Really, they're looking for the big picture in terms of why you've decided to do things, which is more important than exactly what you're doing. And you can quickly look at what the class looks like, and you can see. One thing I just want to point out here is a couple of things. First of all, women are a big piece of it. International students are going to be a third, big piece of it. But what's interesting is undergraduate institutions, 232. So the thought that there's one feeder school to Harvard Business School is absolutely wrong. Frequently, I'll have a client call me, has anyone ever been accepted from Boise State in Idaho? Again, in a school that most of you may never have heard of. Has anyone ever been accepted from a small Grinnell college, a very small college in Indiana? And the answer is maybe, but that's actually an advantage. They could fill their class with Harvard, Yale's, MITs. So they need people who bring diversity to the classroom. So another point of diversity, for example, might be nonprofit or government or education. So the reality is that they will have plenty of consultants, plenty of folks coming out of technology, but are those professions on the edges that they don't see a lot of that's actually interesting to them? I tell people who are in sales is really interesting to HBS. You simply don't see a lot of them. Okay, going through here, hard to get into, average GPA of 3.7 on American, based on an American scale. GMAT range, and this I find interesting, is the average GMAT is 730. Figure that men score higher, women score lower. So men, the average is probably up to 740, women is about 720. International students, we're looking really at 750. The average for Indian male engineers is probably in the neighborhood of 755. So on the one hand, it's good to know. It's good for something to shoot for. At the same point, let me point out GMAT range. This is the range, 620 to 790. So there are certainly people who got in with lower than average GMAT scores. But obviously, you have to make it up in some other way. And what does that other way be? It could be really anything in terms of what you've done in the office, out of the office, how you've progressed, the leadership you've shown, but you have to make it clear during the essay. 2 years ago, I had a client come to me. He had a 790 GMAT. He had been rejected from all the top schools. And after reading his application, he basically sounded like everyone else. There's nothing unique to him. So Harvard Business School, Wharton, and Stanford, they have complete comfort in rejecting people with such a high score. That said, we completely recrafted his story. We got something that was unique and really specific to him. He then had his choice between Booth and Columbia. GRE, same thing. Okay. Keep in mind what the someone's reading 10,000 applications a year. What are they actually looking for? And again, there's no one formula, but here's some things that we certainly want to push here. First of all, it has to be thoughtful. It has to reflect on who you are, even more so with Stanford. It really has to reflect on who you are, that you've given some thought, that you're not playing the game of, I think I know what the admissions committee wants. They don't want anything specific. They want to understand who you are. Also, simplicity. Don't overthink things. This is not a creative writing exercise. This is an opportunity for you to say who you are. In the case of HBS now is 900 words. In the case of Wharton, it's about 500 words. In the case of Stanford, it's 650 words. So the reality is you have a short story to tell. It has to be unique to you. It can only be done with having a simple, straightforward story. And one thing that you absolutely need to show in the story, whether it's, again, Stanford, what matters most to you and why, with HBS is what else do you want them to know about you? And that is all around values. This idea here of, okay, what motivates you? What's your passion? Help me connect the dots of your life. Why did you do A, B, C? What do you want to do at business school? Why do you then want to do D, E, and F? And the reality is it has to be about your passion. It has to be unique. It has to be genuine. And HBS makes it very clear also how it sees the pillars of an application, if you will, the things they're looking for. And first of all, they have something called the habit of leadership. And let me just quickly point out the verbiage here. It's not just examples of leadership, it's habit of leadership. This notion that in any experience you've had, in any community you've been a part of, you have been a leader. So maybe as a child, you were a leader on the cricket team. Maybe in high school, you were a leader in the tennis team. Maybe in college, you were a leader in an entrepreneurial venture, but it's leader, 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 all through your life, not just one example. Analytics, aptitude, appetite. The bottom line is, can you use numbers? Can you use numbers in a business context? Most of you will answer this question either through your GPA, your GMAT, GRE scores, even some of the work you do. If you feel like maybe your analytical abilities are not fully shown, certainly a recommender can speak to that. Engage community citizenship. Basically, this idea is when you go to business school, you're not going to be the person who sits in the library. You're going to be really engaged with your fellow students. You're going to make each of them better. The reality is you're going to bring out from them using your leadership skills to make things on campus better. You're going to be really the driver for any type of organization. It doesn't even matter, but just making sure that you are driver of the community in some ways. I also like to tuck in here, engage community citizenship, also engage international citizen. This idea here that you do have a global perspective. Here's what you've done. And again, it is all focused on this idea here of, I'm going to be a tremendous asset to Harvard Business School, Stanford, wherever it is, Wharton. Okay, so now let's talk about how do you actually create a Standout MBA application. I'm going to also pause and ask people, if you have questions, by all means, put them in the chat, and I'll catch up to them probably sooner rather than later. Okay. So why is HBS's 2020? What is HBS's 2021 essay? This is also the essay for 22-23. As we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? Now there's a 900-word limit. And what I always tell people is let's focus very clearly on the language itself. And the language itself includes words like, actually, let me go back a slide. As we review your application, first of all, assume that they've looked at your application in great detail. They've looked at your resume. They've looked at what's in the application itself. So you do not have to repeat certain things. What more would you like us to know? Because as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School. Now, more is a really interesting word. And what we mean by that, more, okay? What it is, it's acknowledging the fact that you can only say so much through your resume or through the recommendations. So instead, more can really speak to two different things. One is something else in terms of something that may be new that they don't see other places, as well as more details about something they do see other places. Okay, with this idea here of it is not just fresh information. It's not just this idea here, oh, I forgot to tell them something. Rather, you want to focus on something that's been important in your life that is either not reflected in your application in some ways, or is reflected but not to the degree that does it justice. So there's always this question, okay, must it be something new to answer this question? And the answer is no. I just need to use the essay to better understand who you are, to better understand, again, what your passions are. So from that perspective, that's really important. Now, and you always have to think more. We have, and from the admissions committee, it's worth going over. We have no preconceived ideas of what good looks like. We look forward to a lot of variance, and you'll see that in our book of essays. I've worked with a lot of clients, a lot of people who were accepted at HBS. We have tried all sorts of different things. We've had success with all sorts of different types of essays. There is no one formula. Whoever tells you there is a formula, they are wrong. That's it. And this whole idea here of it's a time for you to pause, reflect, show yourself as as a person who is truly motivated, show yourself as genuine, show yourself as someone who knows why they're going to business school, that they can really articulate their passion. This idea here of if you know yourself, you will make for a much better classmate. And the reality of is, and we touch on here a little bit, but it's certainly worth really hammering in on. By the time you reach the point of writing your essays and applying to school, you have to remember that much of your application is done, even if you haven't quite filled out the paperwork. Your recommenders, you can prompt them a little bit, but the reality is that they're going to write what they want to write. You're not going to be able to bring them new information at this point. Your GPA, undergraduate GPA, transcript, it's done. Those days are over. Even your job, this idea here of your job progression is done. I don't recommend jumping jobs right before you apply. That's probably a longer conversation, but that's done. Obviously, where you're from, your background, and all these other things, it's done. So where is the point of leverage at this point in the process? It's your essay. So again, it's an essay that really requires you to think deeply about it and to take your time. And we'll talk about what that means. So the first thing is, let's think about how one writes a really compelling essay. The first thing is inventory your various roles. And we call it multidimensional brainstorming. This idea here of, okay, what have I done with my life? What have I done? Where have I done it? In what context? So you'll see here really across your life, the different roles you've had. Sure, you have a work role. Sure, within work, there may be something, a focus of yours that only you have shown or that you've led. In this case, it's an employee doing a health committee leader, the employee who organizes the Sunday pizza dinners, whatever it is. This idea here of, again, at work, you may just be heads down doing your analysis, or maybe there's something more. Think about that. What have you done in the community? Not just while you were a professional, and business schools recognize when you're working 60 to 80 hours a week, there's not a lot of room to do things with regard to the community or volunteer work, but look back in time. And what other things would people describe you as? And it's not a bad idea to even talk to some folks. You're a standout grandson in this part. You're a good husband. You're a person who loves animals. Whatever it is, just put it down there. Because this is who you are. And as I frequently tell people, what's interesting, what makes a person interesting is what is on the edges of their resume. This idea here of, okay, yes, we know you from the perspective of your job. Yes, we know you from the perspective of being a student. But what else? What else is there? And that's where you want to get to. Okay, at that point, you start saying, in each role, break down each of your activities. Okay, here's what I did. When I was a project manager, I did A, B, C, D, E. Almost somewhat resume-like, but let's at least see some of that. Okay, and then think about things both broadly and deeply. With this idea here of, okay, let's think about it in terms of leadership. Let's think on the one hand, here's all the things that I did as a project manager, but where were some of my successes? Here's everything I did as a health committee leader, but what does that mean? What does it mean to be a leader? Can I articulate that? Are there places that I can use that? At this point, we don't really know. We're trying to get a better sense of each of the things you've put down. And of course, again, inventory your leadership and accomplishments in these roles. Yes, you also have to, there always has to be what I like to say is metrics of success are best. You improve sales by that much. You reduce costs by this much. You hired 6 interns. You managed 5 people, whatever it is. Let's get some metrics around there. Okay. But again, and this is sort of the magic of a powerful essay, is addition by subtraction. This idea here of, okay, you have a point to make. Now you have a better understanding of who you are, what your motivation is. However, you don't need to tell them everything. You have to be very strategic in terms of how much you share. And not because you necessarily don't want to share it, but the requirement of an essay is to be streamlined. The requirement of an essay is actually to make a compelling case, but in not many words. You have to tell who you are, how you're unique, and again, less than 1,000 words. It's hard, but frequently the way you make it easier is just using an axe, cutting things out, and just saying, well, I'm really not making a new point. Instead, I have two examples that are saying the same thing. I'm only going to use one. Okay, now, so as you think about writing an essay, well, let's think about different ways of approaching it. One is thematically. This idea here of, okay, something that may be certainly true to me is I've overcome the obstacles. At that point, then, you really have to put in not lists of ways you've overcome obstacles, but what you've done. This idea here of, okay, I always tell people, you must prove exactly what your motivation has been. So if you tell me you've overcome obstacles, I'll say, sure, prove it to me, though. I don't believe you. Give me some examples. And always think about it that way. Okay, you can say anything you want about yourself, but you have to make sure you have examples to back it up. And approach number two is discuss a single individual accomplishment. Okay, on the one hand, you say overcoming obstacles. You can give 2 or 3 different examples and tie them together. Or you can give one big example, a single individual accomplishment where you were sick and it took you years, but you finally got better. Or you started a company and you had obstacles throughout the way, but you finally did it. Again, if the first approach thematically is really giving a lot of examples, the next approach is just discussing a single example from which you can make a broader point. Okay, listen, discuss a possible journey. It's very similar to the previous one, which is this idea here of, okay, has there been some seminal event in your life that by recounting the event, the admissions committees will feel like they really know you in terms of you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And the problem with these is you have a tendency of getting real cliche. But if you've done appropriately, if you've obviously not tried to, as they say, boil the ocean, meaning throw everything in there, if you create a story that at the end you say, oh, this person he must be a person who can overcome obstacles, then that's worth it. And we always talk about this notion of a thoughtful narrative. This idea here of, again, you have to remember, well, it's not a creative writing project. The flip side is admission committee members are going to read potentially thousands. Each one potentially certainly reads hundreds of applications. So from that perspective, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be something that's thoughtful, that doesn't sound like anyone else's, that even grabs the reader. Okay. And a few things to think about a thoughtful narrative is, and I'll go through each of these, show versus tell. This idea here is, don't tell me you've overcome an obstacle. Give me an example. Show it to me. Keep it simple, keep it honest. And this is what people frequently do ineffectively, which is they tell a big, complicated story, and then the reader is lost. Keep it simple really does mean keep themes limited, keep the examples you're sharing limited, and the idea here is constantly less is more. Why do I include this particular word sentence example? Reflect. What did you learn? Frequently people will say, okay, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, but you don't necessarily say how that was meaningful to you. Was it meaningful to you because you had been sick and now you can get up a mountain? Or was it meaningful for you in terms of it's something you always wanted to do and dreamed of doing, you wanted to do with your grandparent, and they passed away and they couldn't do it? So again, you don't end with the example. You end with the thinking and the impact of it. Reveal who I am. What do I stand for? This is the same notion of, okay, if you're concerned about being in an overrepresented demographic, and everyone is, you have to prove to them that you're looking at a demographic of one. Here's how you're unique. Here's why I am who I am. And here's an example or an essay or a theme that really demonstrates that. Okay, here's a few examples. Thoughtful narrative. Here's a perfect example of show versus tell. My best qualities are that I'm a dedicated and compassionate person. I can't help but feel empathetic towards all peoples and animals. So I've been volunteering at a no-kill animal shelter for several years. It warms my heart every time I see a puppy rescued, and I am relentless in finding the owner of strays. First of all, you gave me a little bit of good information in terms of what you do. Could also be in a resume. I'm not sure that I need to see in the essay. And you also tell me my best qualities are that I am dedicated and compassionate. If you're telling me that by volunteering in the animal shelter, that's how you're proving it, Well, I'll push back to you. Well, a lot of people, why do I believe that why you're dedicating compassion? Why can't you just like dogs? And instead it's like dedicating compassion. Why should I believe you? You haven't proved it to me. Okay, you volunteered in an animal shelter. That's terrific, but you haven't really proved it to me yet. So instead you say, okay, here's what I did. How many posters did you fill up? The reality is you volunteered in an animal shelter. I don't know what that even means. Here you're providing it to me. Here you're showing exactly how difficult it is. Here you're making it clear that you even engage with the owners. And here, honestly, as you read it over, which is more compelling? And which is the one that gives more details about who the person is and why they do what they do? Certainly the second one. Okay, keep it simple. I call this the Grammarly problem, in the sense of read the language right there and recognize that, God, that's a lot of words to tell me that they made a mistake on PowerPoint. Tremendous amount of esteem. It is too much. You haven't moved the story forward. In front of the CEO, an impressive man with unrivaled pedigree and someone for whom I held a tremendous amount of esteem. I don't know what it says about you. CEO seems terrific, but he's not applying to business school, or she's not applying to business school. Yeah, you hold your boss in esteem. Okay, it's like, that's fine. I'm not sure that it is particularly impactful. So instead, look at this. They simplify the whole thing, and now it's about them. Very quickly, oops, I spelled the guy's name with an extra O. Yikes. And wow, this is really important. It was the biggest moment of my career. And then, God, was I concerned. I was really fearful. And now we see what this person is talking about. Okay. Reflections. Okay. I'm going to here are two different versions of really the same thing. I'm going to have people just read it offline. You get a sense of different approaches to this. Is one better than the other? Honestly, it is really something of a personal choice. I like number 2, but number 1 works as well. But take a minute to read that. Let me see if I have any questions right here. And as of right now, I'm looking. So please take a minute if you have any questions. By all means, let me know. And, okay. So the first is what's this season looking like? Why do you think that there are less applicants this year? I think there's a little bit, great question. Right now, we are seeing at some schools applications down by about 20%. That's what we hear directly from the admissions committee members. Hold that thought. So clearly, now is a great time to apply. And it's a great time to apply because, again, the competitiveness of the class is less. The reality is though, it's how much less is it? And is it meaningful? Whether now the acceptance rate goes from 10 to 15%, is that meaningful? Yeah. 10 to 20%, certainly. But at the same point, just to share what's happening with our own company, we are now starting to see real uptick in people who are applying to business school. We're something of a delay in the system where we see people and what they're planning probably about 6 months early, 3 months early. And I can tell you, round 2 is going to be a lot busier, and we're really expecting next year to be even busier. So keep that in mind as you think about your own plans. By all means, keep in mind that it may be a little bit easier to apply now. Round 1 versus round 2. I'll push back on a couple of different ways. First of all, you apply when you have the best application. So if a good application in round 1 or a great application in round 2, I'd apply round 2. I think it's that simple. Certainly I also tell people round 1 is long. So this idea here of round 1 is from Harvard in September 7th, all the way to NYU October 15th. MIT is somewhere around September 25th or something. So you can also say, okay, Harvard Business School, it's my dream school. Harvard Business School, Stanford Wharton, you better have a great application. If you can't get to great in the next month or so, then what you may want to do instead is hold them to round 2, but still use this at time to apply to booths a little bit later. MIT is later, NYU is later. So in that case, you really want to think about not so much round 1 versus round 2, but where you apply in round 1. What are you setting up for round 2? And honestly, for many of the top schools, the acceptance rate is not hugely different. Stanford takes people whenever they want to take people. HBS, their round 1 acceptance rate is a little bit higher. than round two. For international students, you got to push a little bit more to get in round one because there is a bigger difference. But the reality is that for the top schools, you need a near perfect application. If you can't get there, you can't get there. Okay, moving on here. Hopefully you read both of those. Listen, I should have moved this along as well. Again, two different ways of looking, two different ways of starting an essay. I think both very, very good. And part of it is just, what is your own voice? Either one of these can work by all means. Take a quick look. Let me answer another question here. GMAT, GRE, TOEFL. Really, we talked a little bit about GMAT and GRE. Let me add a couple wrinkles to it. First of all, there is now a new test called the Executive Assessment, the EA, which is a mini version of the GMAT. Traditionally, it's just been used for executive MBA programs. Now, however, a fairly small group of schools are now using the EA for the full-time two-year MBA program. That includes NYU, that includes Columbia, that includes Duke, and probably one or two more. So if you are truly struggling with your GMAT or GRE and you can't get near average, and near average really means, 20, 30, 40 points down, then you may want to start thinking about the executive assessment. Another question is around the TOEFL. It's funny, TOEFL can be considered very differently at different schools. Some schools don't require the TOEFL at all. MIT doesn't require the TOEFL. Some schools, the TOEFL score required is very low. I think Stanford, or I forgot who it is, Booth is popping around about 100. Booth, I think, is at 104. Excuse me. HBS is at 109. And as far as HBS goes, you don't get 109, we don't look at your application. I think that's really it. As I say that, God, I just think to myself, there has to be an exception, but I've never seen one. Wharton, the average is 110. I don't think they're quite as strict, but the average is higher. So when all said and done. So if your TOEFL isn't quite where you want it to be, out of everything, you probably want to spend some time doing that. Which then brings us to the next question of, okay, if you need the GMAT or GRE, if you have to get your score up, if you have to get your TOEFL score up, then maybe round two is the answer for you. These are things that are sort of do or die when all said and done. Yes, again, there's always variability there, but if you're not getting it to at least close to the right place, well, I would certainly encourage you to nail that down and apply round two. Just remember, though, particularly for HBS, but really for all these top schools, you don't need to write about your goals. Your goals come out in a couple of different ways. With HBS, there's a completely different question. With Stanford, there's the why Stanford question. And with Wharton, it's probably the school that you have to talk about most about your goals, and it comes out of Wharton 1. You don't need to write about HBS. That's true. When it comes to HBS, don't even bother talking about them. When it comes to Stanford, they ask specifically why Stanford. That requires some research. When it comes to Wharton, they require why Wharton. That requires some research. Research here really is about talking to other people. I tell people, get behind the website, understand who these people are. Speaking to them, understanding the community is the best way of doing this. And if you don't know anybody, then certainly there may be opportunities through LinkedIn to find somebody or approach some of the club presidents. The wine club, I also love wine. Hi, Bob. And you can blind email them. Hi, Jane. I also love wine. I'd love to hear more about what the wine club's doing. Oh, can we hop on a call? And then you can talk to them more broadly. Answer the question. This is less important, I would say, in terms of the main essays. For any of these schools, I think it's really important that for some of the smaller questions. So the impact you've had. Okay, Stanford has 3 questions around impact. Okay, impact, let's put metrics around it. What do you mean by impact? How are you defining that? Can you prove it? So that's about to answer the question. Read it aloud. That's part of the proofreading process. Yes, by all means. You can certainly bring in somebody else to proofread it. It's a little dangerous because whenever you have given someone else, when you allow someone else to look at your document and give criticism, the reality is they always do. Never in the history of mankind has someone been given a document and asked to critique when they have not come back with any critiques. No document is perfect. Don't make yourself crazy. If you have somebody else look at it, have it look at their outline early in the process, or have them look at the end just for pure proofreading for typos. Okay, application strategy. Here's how to approach it. So obviously, you're going to start off with, here we start off with, let's talk about your career essay. And again, HBS, it's very short. Wharton and Stanford, a little bit longer here. And at the end of the day, you have to certainly be specific. You can't talk about a firm that has never recruited, that has never been a presence at these different schools. At the end of the day, you need to pull the employment report, have an understanding of where people go. And again, it should be short. It should be sharp. You can even mention. I frequently encourage my clients to mention companies they're interested in. But really, you have to be specific here. There's ambitious but achievable, and you want to make sure you get that mix right. In the sense of ambitious but achievable. You are someone who sells shoes. Your hope is to open up your own store. That is certainly achievable. It's not particularly aspirational. You sell shoes and you want to start a venture capital company that just invests in shoes. That is certainly aspirational. It strikes me as not particularly achievable. You've never done anything venture capital. It doesn't make sense. I'm not achieving shoes or a venture capital play. So instead, you want to do something like, okay, I've been a shoe salesman. What I want to do is have a new age shoe store where they through some sort of artificial intelligence, they figure out the best shoe for you. I then want to roll it out across the country. Okay, that's aspirational. It seems like it's achievable. At the end of the day, you have to, again, show yourself as somebody who will be a great representative for the school because of the accomplishments that you're looking to have. And the reality is those accomplishments should manifest within the career that you're suggesting. Just one thing I really want to highlight here. Many times you'll hear people talk about they want to go into private equity, they want to go into venture capital. You'll even see the numbers in terms of the percentage of students that go into these very, very difficult fields to penetrate. They are very hard to get into. The students who actually go into private equity or venture capital are probably going back there. So I would always be very wary when I see an applicant who says no venture capital experience wants to go into venture capital. So that's where my antenna go up as the admissions committees. Instead, you should have a job between your graduate business school and between these really big aspirations. Always think to yourself, what job do I want to get out of business school? What do I want to get? Where do I want to be 5 years out, 10 years out? There's a few new background questions for HBS. There's always impact questions really baked into Stanford. Just to go through them quickly. We understand that your racial, ethnic, and cultural background may not fully capture by the above options. Please feel free to use the space below to show more about your racial, ethnic, or cultural identity. At the end of the day, it really is in terms of how are they going to make the class more diverse. So this idea here, again, nobody is sort of limited by the color of their skin or their religion or whatever it is. So here's an opportunity to share how maybe there's far more to the story in terms of your background. There's far more to the story in terms of you're not just X, Y, or Z. Actually, you've lived places A, B, C. Share that with them. As we get to know you, it's helpful to learn where you grew up. For many people, that can be more than one place. Please share it with us times where you spent the majority of your life. And if you moved around again, this is just a sense of looking for diversity. In this case, just geographic diversity. And just people who've lived multiple places, speak multiple languages, are going to be better global citizens, better global business people. Please use this section to share any additional information about your family background. Honestly, this is one of those things where it's an opportunity to show how, despite being whatever your demographic is, there are other nuances to it that you want to share. And what those nuances are could be though ostensibly you're male Caucasian, in actual fact, your mother happens to be African American. Whatever it might be, just to make it clear that you are not quite who you are. And again, there's always things you want to add to an application. And frequently people see the additional information as a place where you can add another essay. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The goal with additional information is really, if you can write nothing, that's best. Otherwise, it's usually about a problem. Why'd you drop out of college? Why your grades are so bad? That sort of thing. Okay. Finally, you apply to Harvard Business School, you apply to Stanford Business School, you get an application, you get an interview. The Harvard Business School interview is very tough. The Wharton interview is called a team-based discussion. 6 of you in a room going through a business case, hard. Stanford, fairly straightforward interview, just with an alumni. These each have to be really prepped in a different way. HB, say what you, obviously our company has a lot of different services. I think one of our best set of services is certainly interview prep for Harvard, which again is hard. Harvard interview is hard. Or Wharton, we have great test prep services for Wharton, because again, that is truly different. One thing that you're asked to do after the Harvard essay is do a post-interview reflection, 1-page document, and generally it is of some value. It doesn't make or break your application by any means. It's really an opportunity to respond to some things that maybe you didn't feel like you effectively responded to during the conversation, or things that you forgot that you want to share, or even at this point, maybe a reason to say why particular Harvard Business School. Again, once you get to this point, you should be feeling really pretty good. Resume, you can look online at our resume guide. And I think the reality is that you want to keep it clear. Always think about success metrics. Prove things to me. You say you had great responsibility. Well, what did you do? How many people did you manage? You were a leader for something. Well, again, what did you do? How many people did you lead? What I also tell people is business schools know the top half of your resume very well. If you're a consultant at one of the big firms, they know what a associate consultant does, or whatever an analyst does. Investment bankers, they know what you do. And they also know that it's really hard to have tremendous impact when you're only 2 or 3 or 4 years out of college. By all means, share whatever impact you have. What they find more interesting, and a piece of you that they don't know otherwise, is the bottom half of your resume. What are your passions? Where do you volunteer? What are some of the things you've done in college? What are some of the things you do now? What do you do in your spare time? That, I think, is a place where people can really distinguish themselves. And I think it's an area that most people really, I don't want to say ignore, but they don't spend as long as they should. Again, if you work at Bain and you're an analyst or an associate there, case over, business schools know what you do. It's really hard to show yourself as particularly unique. Yeah, of course, there's always exceptions. There's certain people that do. I had someone who will be attending Harvard Business School. He was a BCG consultant, and he actually did things that were different from other BCG consultants, and we were able to communicate that. Okay, recommendations and interviews. Recommendations: develop really strong relationship with your recommenders. See them more as mentors. Have them see you more as mentors and as mentees. And at that point, they're going to be your biggest champions. You're really looking for the biggest champion you can have. Ignore titles. Ignore titles completely. And I say that on 2 terms. First of all, make sure that someone who knows you day to day and can speak to very specific ways, how you've performed, that's who you want. Again, it's not that Steve is awesome, accept him. It's Steve has done X, Y, or Z with tremendous impact. So generally that in many ways, you should really think about, you need a day-to-day manager. Whether it was your current day-to-day manager who would be really upset, or if the current day-to-day manager would be really upset that you're leaving, maybe a previous day-to-day manager. They want to see that there. And again, anyone who can really show you work. There's questions, there's nuances. You work on a family business. You've just been at a job a short time. And that's something that we can have a talk when we have that one-on-one session. And as far as interviews, this is, again, there's all sorts of different types of interviews. Most schools actually have what are called blinded interviews, meaning the interviewer may be a member of the alumni, maybe an alumni, current student. All they'll see is your resume. It'll be a conversation. And what they're really looking for in that interview is, will you fit in? Are you weird? Do you speak English? Can they see you as being a teammate? Harvard Business School, as we talked about, Harvard Business School, very hard interview. They look at your entire application. MIT is the same thing. Very hard interview. They look at your entire application. They pressure test and make sure you know what you're talking about. They make sure that you did what you actually did. Again, Wharton is different as well. And HBS is more, Stanford's a little bit easier. about mbaMission. So let me just tell you a little bit about us, and then I'll answer some of your questions. Obviously, I'm going to put a plug in first for our book again. Honestly, there is always something to be said for seeing real winning essays, many of which have been written by my clients in terms of what get people in. And again, this is not to be used as a template. Admission committee members have read our book too. They know what's out there. It's not to be used as a template. Rather, what it's to be used for is seeing that essays can come in many different shapes and forms, but all of them tell a unique story. All of them really represent who the applicant is, and all of them feel like they're meeting a new person. So I think it's valuable for you to take a look at. And now on sale for $24. Very quickly, we're the best at what we do. There's nobody who comes close. And I say this very humbly. I mean, you can just see in terms of what our reviews are, in terms of what GMAT Club says about us, in terms of Poets and Quant says about us. We are full-time consultants. We've been at it for a long time. We are a team. If there's ever a question about anything, I have plenty of people who can help you with that. Obviously, we do all sorts of different things. There's a lot of free resources on our website that encourage people to look at. Insider guides, get to know each of the business schools. We have our blog that helps you with thinking about the different essays. We also have interview guides. When time for an interview, we can help you through that. And all of this is free. What's also free is 30 minutes consultation with us. Hop on the phone with us. Let us meet you, whether it's with me or any one of my colleagues. And we can give you a general sense of, we can answer your questions, whatever they might be, give you a general sense of profile, what schools may be appropriate for you. By all means, there's no reason you shouldn't do it. And then, of course, we have all sorts of different opportunities to work with us, and a lot more on the website in terms of pricing and the different services we offer. And here's some of them. There is a couple of things that I certainly want to highlight here. There's our start to finish package, soup to nuts. We work with you as a partner. I get the best results with my clients who buy the full package. I just do. I work with people hourly as well. That is you. If you have specific questions, needs, you need help writing an essay, you're basically done with it. You know where it's going. Then by all means, bring us in. Mock interview prep. I think that's great. I would not go to a Harvard Business School interview without paying for some prep. I think that's it. It's just too hard an interview. Same thing with Wharton. It's a weird interview. Most people are not used to being in a room with 6 other people, sort of same backgrounds, and sort of all figuring out a business case together. It's hard. We do training in that. We actually put you in a room with those sorts of people. And then we have, if you're very early in the process, by all means, we can help you with maybe just, a few hours of advising, which is our pre-application strategy. Meet our team, go online. The reality is I would say just look at the recommendations. I think when you're choosing a consultant to work with, it is very important that the match is right. So come and meet us. When I say the match is right, it may not be obvious. In the sense of, I have my colleague Harshad, Indian guy, Indian engineer, went to Booth, again, has had many similar experiences to other male Indian engineers who want to go to Booth. And honestly, and I work with Harshad all the time. And there are frequently people do a free consult with Harshad because they, quote, look like him, and he sends them right to me. Because the reality is the best consultant for them will be somebody who thinks different, looks different, who has different experiences in life. Because again, we have to make sure that what you're communicating to business schools is actually something that's going to thrill them. And sometimes you need a person who looks like you to do that. And sometimes you need a person who looks very different from you to do that. And we will certainly help advise you on that. Again, some great people. Jeremy, Katie, Lynn, Rachel, Susan, Jessica, Harshad, Michael, Gabi, Kim. We just have a great group here. And by all means, get to know us a little bit through that first 30-minute consult. Look at our bios, and all of us would love to help you. Though honestly, for round 1, it's getting tight. A lot of people don't have a huge amount of availability, but that's something we can talk you through as well. Here you go. Here's our website and things. In this region is a link to sign up for a free consult with us. And again, 30 minutes, no reason not to. Let me see if there's some other comments here. Is it better to take more of a storytelling approach for the essay or outlining an our experiences and accomplishment, probably story telling approach. Your accomplishments and experience have probably been outlined in your resume. Great then. When to get started right now? Honestly, there's about a month for round one. There's about, obviously, it is about 3-4 months. Here's what we tell people. A comprehensive approach to the application process, at a minimum, takes 6 weeks. Does that mean people do it in far shorter time? They do. There's no question about it. There are people who don't use consultants, who blast it out over the weekend, and they get in. So, so from that perspective, people do it. We are comfortable. If you're going to tell a sophisticated story, we think you need 6 weeks. I've certainly worked with folks much longer than that. I have worked with folks who's taken 6 months. And again, it's always this tension here. Who's the most successful? People who work with me for a long time, over time, because we put things down, we let it marinate, we come back to it, make sure we're answering the question. I get to show it to other people. And that's also what we do, is we pass essays around with each other. However, if you only have a very limited amount of time, I'm actually doing a webinar tomorrow. You can go to our website and specifically about strategies around doing that last minute application. And at the end of the day, it is telling that story, is working hard to find the story that is truly unique to you. That's at the core. So look at our website, join me for tomorrow's webinar if you're truly doing the last minute application. And have a low bar in terms of just applying round 2. You need a really good application for these schools. Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, MIT, Haas, Duke, Columbia, Booth, they still see a huge number of applications. And the reality is they have to be great. The acceptance rate is just too low to do anything less than great. Another question here. How important is GPA? GPA is important, but let me explain to you, your GPA may already be done. So what can you do about it? The reality is a GPA is just one measure of your academic abilities that business schools will look at. There's certainly other measures of academic ability that they will see. One is certainly GMAT or GPA or GMAT or GRE score. So if you have a low GPA, I'd really pound the GRE or the GMAT. I think at the end of the day, that's a place you can make it up. You're not doing great on the GMAT or the GRE. You've even tried the executive assessment. You're still not showing great academic potential. In that case, you may have to go off and take an online course to prove that you can do the academics. Online courses, the sort of gold star in online courses is the HBS Core program. It is a little bit expensive. It is three courses, but once you've done it, you've done well on it, then that will answer a lot of questions if you have a low GPA. Great then. It looks like we're just coming to the end here. Any last questions? The light is turning yellow as far as last questions go. What I would say is, if you leave this conversation and you have other questions, if you leave this presentation and have other questions, then just get in touch with us. I think my email is there. You can go to our website. You can sign up for a consult, and not to hit this too hard. This will not be a sales call. You know what you can buy if you go to our website. Rather, it's an opportunity to get to know us a little bit. On that note, applying to business school is a very exciting process. It's a very exciting process in your life, in terms of your career, and potentially very exciting next 2 years or so. So by all means, good luck with it. Enjoy it. And if we can be helpful in any way, please come to us at mbaMission. Bye now. Have a good day, everyone.